Well, hey there, second graders. It's time for another math lesson. Now, we've been talking about dividing up different shapes into equal parts. And we had a whole bunch of exercises on that. So you should have that down pretty well by now. What we're going to do in lesson 11.11, that's on page 765 in your math workbooks, is we're going to try and use our imaginations now, put on those thinking caps, and we're going to solve some problems. Now, the book offers us a bunch of different problems. Our job is to think about the problem that it poses to us and then find a solution. So let's look at 765. The first problem here is that there are two sandwiches that are the same size. So we've got two sandwiches that are the same size. There's our sandwiches. Each sandwich is divided into fourths. Remember we talked yesterday about 1/2, 1/3, and 1/4. Remember, each part that is an equal size is that fraction. So now we've got two sandwiches that are cut into fourths. So that means, remember the bottom number tells you how many parts it's cut into? So they're both cut into 4 parts. But they're cut differently. Well, let's see. Let's cut the first sandwich this way. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. Now you got to figure out a different way to cut the other sandwich, but still only have 4 parts. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. The easiest way would be just to cut it into 4 parts that way. But you could also cut this sandwich that way and have 4 parts. Now, none of those 3 are cut the same. They're all cut different, but they all have 4 equal parts. So you see, sometimes there's more than one way to solve a problem in math. So let's go ahead and investigate what other problems they have for us on 766 and 767. Now you see there a bunch of shapes, and I'll just bet you they're going to ask you to divide those shapes up differently, but come up with the same fraction of parts. Let's look at number 1. So here we have 2 squares. Remember, a square is a shape where all the sides are exactly the same. So there's my 2 squares. Now he wants to cut each sheet into halves. So what are 2 different ways you can cut it in half? Well, that should be pretty easy. But again, there's more than 2 ways, so you should be able to figure one out that works. The first thing is the easy one is to just cut it in half. The second one, because they're a square, would be to do that. And you see, each one is 1/2 and each is equal. Now, just so you know, there is another way, and that is just like that. So you got to think a little bit outside the box. It's not always straight across or straight up and down. Sometimes you can do it on an angle or on the diagonal and still end up with two parts that are exactly the same. All right, what's number 2? I bet you guys are already on number 4. This is so easy. Number 2, we got 2 pieces of cloth that are the same size. And they show those 2 pieces of cloth in the shape of, what's this shape, kids? That's right, a rectangle. So we have 2 pieces of cloth, same size. She needs to divide each piece into thirds. Thirds, that means there's going to be 3 equal parts. So, the simple thing to do is to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That's 3 equal parts. Now what's another way we can do it? Can we do this one on a diagonal? No, you can't. Can't do it because you'd only end up with 2 equal parts. So what's another way we can break this into 3 equal parts? Well, it's simply by doing this. And that gives us 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. So there's 2 ways to break the rectangle. Problem number 3. We got 2 pieces of toast that are the same size. And as I look at the example in the book, those 2 pieces of toast are squares. What are 2 different ways you can divide the toast into halves? Well, number 3 is exactly the same as number 1. So that shouldn't be a problem. Number 4. Here we have 2 small trays of pasta, and they're the same size. What are 2 different ways you can cut it into fourths? Well, those 2 trays of pasta are not squares. They're actually rectangles. And we're going to cut it into fourths. So, again, the simplest thing to do is to cut it into 4 sections, 1/4. Now, you can then come and do it in the opposite direction. And each one of these is a 4th. There is a 3rd way you can do this because the diagonal works when you're cutting something in fourths. So now you have 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. Does everybody agree with that? I cut it into 4 parts. But let me ask you a question. Does this part here look bigger than this part? Oh, so that only works if it's a square. If it's a rectangle, then you cannot use the diagonal because this part here is actually way bigger than that part. So, if you're going to use an X pattern or a diagonal line to cut it into 4 parts, That only works if it's a square. Oh, number 5. Aaron has 2 ribbons that are the same size. What are 2 different ways you can divide the ribbon into thirds? So it's just another practice. You got your 2 ribbons and they're rectangular in shape. So you're going to cut it into thirds and you're going to cut it into thirds. Remember the bottom number. That tells you how many pieces exactly the same will be in each one of those illustrations. All right, the next page. Number 6, on page 768 now. David needs to divide 2 pieces of paper into the same number of equal parts. Look at how the first piece of paper is divided. Now you notice right away that that is a square. All the sides are the same length. Show how to divide the second piece of paper a different way. Well, he's dividing it into how many sections? Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4. So all you're going to do is take that square and you're going to cut it into 4 pieces using a different way of doing it. Because it's a square, you can do it just like that. 1/4, 1/4. Altogether, you got 4 equal divisions of that square. That wasn't hard. Let's look at number 7 where we got to go a little deeper. Mrs. Lee has 2 sandwiches that are the same size. She cuts each sandwich into halves. How many equal parts does she have? So they've made it into a little math problem for you. So we got 2 sandwiches, and those 2 sandwiches are cut in half. Doesn't matter how they're cut, as long as the 2 parts are equal. And they're asking how many equal parts does she have in all. That means you need to add them all together. So this one has 2 equal parts, and this one has 2 equal parts. So all together, she has 4 equal parts. 2 plus 2. Ooh, now we're going to think smarter. Emma wants to cut a piece of paper into fourths. Fill in the bubble next to all the ways she cut the paper. Now, remember, they have to be equal. That means all the parts have to be the same size. Look at those different illustrations on problem 8 and which ones are cut into fourths, in other words, 4 equal sections. Number 1, the first one there, that looks pretty good to me. There are 4 parts, and they're all the same size. What's wrong with the second illustration? Trying to sneak around there and trick you with one that only has 3 parts. Nope, the problem is looking for fourths, so second one is no good. And the third one, what's wrong with the third one? They are not all the same size. So therefore that one's no good. But the fourth shape there is cut exactly into 4 parts, and they all look the same size to me. So the first one and the last one, the two in the middle, you don't want to mark those. Those are wrong. So now let's look at the homework here. Max has square pizzas that are the same size. What are two different ways he can divide the pizza into fours? Now, how many times do we have to divide something into 4 parts before you figure out how to do that? So go ahead and show me 2 ways you can cut that pizza into 4 equal pieces. And they're square. So you've got at least 3 options there. Number 2, Lisa has 2 pieces of paper. What are 2 different ways she can divide those into half? So find 2 different ways to cut it equally in half. Number 3, draw and write to explain how you can divide a rectangle into thirds in 2 different ways. So you need to draw a rectangle, and then you need to divide it into 3 equal parts. And because it's a rectangle, you're not going to be able to use the diagonal lines. You can't go from corner to corner. So you got to break that into 3 parts, and there's 2 easy ways to do that. Looking at page 770 of the homework, we see Bree cuts a piece of cardboard into thirds, and it shows you the illustration. It says circle other shapes that are divided into thirds. And now you've got to be able to recognize, looking at those 4 different shapes, if any of them are cut into 3 equal parts. And the only one I see, well, that'll be my clue. Only one of them is correct. Looking at number 2, it's asking you to circle the shape with 3 equal parts. Same kind of question, isn't it? Whether it's 3 equal parts or thirds, they mean the same thing. So one of those illustrations is correct. 3 of them are wrong. Find the correct one. Number 3, the first thing you got to recognize about that shape is it's a pentagon. It has 5 sides. So, what's our rule when it comes to how many angles a shape has? Count the sides. That's how many angles. What is the best estimate for the length of a baseball bat? Now they're going to kind of dig into your memory and your recollection or your experience having seen a baseball bat. Now, if you've never seen a baseball bat, well then you don't have a clue how to answer this question. But most of us by now have seen a baseball bat. So it's asking you to make an estimate of how long you think a baseball bat is. And that's a subjective answer. You answer it as best you can based on what you think would be the right measurement for a baseball bat. Then finally, it's asking you, which is another way to write 10 minutes after 9. Now this goes back to being able to tell time. You got your clock. And it's saying it's 10 minutes after 9. So 9 is your hour, that's the small hand. And the long hand is 10 minutes. So each number represents 5 minutes, so the big hand's going to be on the 2. So what's another way that you can write 10 minutes after 9. In the example in the book, they put the minutes before the hour. So another way to write it would be to put the hour followed by the minutes. So this would be 9:10. Got it? 9:10. That's another way. Well, that's lesson 11.11. I don't think there's a single part of that that you can't figure out very easily. Now tomorrow is a big day for you second graders. And you want to know why? Because tomorrow we're going to review the whole Unit 11. And you know what that means? Once we get done with that, and you've been successful with your answers, you have completed the entire year's math book. So we're one day away from finishing the math altogether. And then you can rest a little bit. So tomorrow will be chapter 11 review, and we'll go over everything we've learned throughout these 11 different lessons so that you can finally say the end. You guys take care of yourselves out there, stay safe, stay out of trouble, and be kind. See you tomorrow.